of course, the leadership conference then, that became annual, didn't it?
Yes.
And we met annually.
I felt it was important. We needed an annual focal point. And obviously we'd lost Stoneleigh, and we had, prior to that, had an occasional leaders event at Brighton.
Yes.
But I thought we must meet annually, and the leaders event became very important. And it overlapped with Mobilise, which was our kind of 20s student and 20s thing.
20s, yeah.
And that really worked very well at the Brighton Centre. So we gathered in our, about 5,000, I guess, everybody together, leaders and Mobilise.
Yeah. And
so that became our central point for a while.
Yes, yes. And of course, one of the losses with moving from Stoneleigh was amongst the young people, wasn't it, in youth? And I think you felt strongly, didn't you, that we needed to have an ongoing event for young people, or maybe it was Joel who felt that. I can't remember.
No, I think it was we as a team. I mean, I think I felt it as much as anybody, but I think it was the team. I think we realised that although God has spoken to us about Stoneleigh closing, for young people in our current climate, which is so ungodly, and they're often the only Christian in their school or in a class at school, and maybe come from not a very big church and so on. But to gather at somewhere like Stoneleigh in their thousands was, oh, wow, I'm part of something much bigger. And so we felt we don't want to lose the impact among the youth. And at first we overlapped with Soul Survivor and encouraged them to go to Soul Survivor, and then it didn't quite kind of resonate. And then actually it was Colin Barron. We asked Colin, would you take responsibility for working this through? And it was Colin who said, I will if I can have Joel Virgo to help me.
Oh, right, okay.
And it was Colin who sort of brought Joel into that. And I mean, amazingly, Gerald Coates had prophesied to Joel at a meeting somewhere some years before. Incredible, we were talking about this recently. He said to Joel, in 7 years' time, you will be leading a large youth program here in the UK. I mean, a really large thing, which was kind of quite funny, really. I mean, his wife, Kate's a youth leader, and she thought, Joel, a youth leader, that's a joke. And of course, then 7 years on, he was leading New Day, which gathers like 7,000 teenagers. And I think it gives them a focal point where they can gather in their thousands and celebrate the reality Jesus is doing a big thing in the world. And I think it's hugely encouraging for them. New Days keeps on growing. It's a blessing.
Yes. I guess it would have been early 2000s. I think Simon was still very much a part of discussions. We began to think of succession planning. You know, we all get old by a year. And so we could anticipate when you would hit whatever age was relevant. And yet we never quite got there in terms of strategic thinking. There didn't seem to be an obvious successor. And then in 2008, you really felt strongly to invite Mark Driscoll, didn't you, to come to the leadership conference. And he spoke, unknown to any of us, what the topic would be on that final afternoon, I think it was, and commissioned you within 5 years to hand over New Frontiers.
Well, that came out in subsequent conversation.
Did it?
I mean, he literally...
Open it up for me.
Yeah. I mean, what happened was it's one of the first times I've ever invited someone to speak whom I'd never met.
Right.
I just heard his preaching on the cross. It was so amazing. I thought, I'd love to get this guy. And he was getting pretty notorious in America, and had a remarkable ministry. And he said, yes, he'd come. And he preached 3 times, and the first 2 were fine. And the third and final talk, without any kind of conversation, he said, are you going to honor your founder or your future? That was the phrase he came up with. And I mean, I thought it was a wonderful word. It was very affirming, and it's a beautiful word, actually, of all that had happened.
Yes.
But he said, looking around, Terry's not going to get any younger. What are you going to do about it? I mean, he just said it to 5,000 people. And suddenly what we had discussed, as you were saying, behind the scenes as a team. We'd occasionally raise the subject, where do we go from here? But we never had a conclusion. And so, it just stirred the pot and moved on, and nothing happened. So now it's in our face, and it was a terrific word. But he actually used the illustration. He said he'd been into my home and seen photographs of my daughter's wedding. And he said, Terry needs to find a young man to marry his daughter, meaning New Frontiers is my daughter, and who's going to take it over, next generation. And it had that next generation feel about it. So, there were some senior men with me, but it was clearly a next generation. And so we thought, wow, what do we do with this? And I went straight to the platform and embraced him and said, I received this as a word from God, owned it straight away. I felt we need to be very clear about this, that I didn't want to leave people going and say, what do we make it? I wanted to be very clear, I accept this is from God. I believed it. I want to affirm it. We will take this seriously. And it was then when I spoke to him privately, he said, I think this will be like a 5-year program, as you say.
Right.
And he was right. He was really, really helpful. Yeah. And the only thing was he talked about a young man.
Yes.
And we began as a team to say, who would that young man be? And so we were looking to another generation and wondering who that young man would be. And then, to be honest, even at that conference, a guy I had just been getting to know from South Africa just said to me, I would warn against that. And what he had been in, they had done precisely that. They'd gone down a generation, and he had said it didn't work for us at all. And they had struggled with it. And then another guy wrote to me and said, be careful with that. I thought, gosh, what's going on? And so I began to seek God. And I felt God spoke to me from a number of different things. I don't know which came first, but we have 5 children, and each of my 5 are now parents of themselves, their children. And one realized, there's not one of the 5 doesn't become the leader of all 5. They are, they're heading their families. And that was one of the things that hit me. Another was that when Simon Pettit had suddenly died tragically in South Africa, from 3 different places, one from South Africa, one from New Zealand, where he actually passed away, and one from England, 3 people wrote to me with exactly the same prophecy, that a great tree had fallen, but you were not to replace it by another great tree, but saplings had grown in his shade, and that you should let them come through. And we had done that in South Africa very successfully. Young guys had come through, including Scott from Zimbabwe and PJ and others. And so the young guys had come, and it had worked. So we had it in our ranks, this you don't go to one, 3 or 4 had done it. And I thought, that's interesting too. And I had other people writing, and I thought, I feel God speaking to us here, not about succession to one, but succession to many.
Yeah.
And I think also, up until that point, a lot of people would have said, I'm leading you, whether it be in America or whatever, but I'm doing it on Terry's behalf. I do it, but I do it for Terry. But I thought, in reality, you're doing it. I come maybe now, as time goes by, whatever location it might be, I might be coming from time to time and they're coming to me, but you're doing the work. Yes. And I felt there are men who are already fathers. And I saw in Psalm 45, I think it is, a place where it talks about, in place of sons will come fathers, or fathers come sons, I can't remember where the verse goes. But this sense that sons would become fathers. And so I felt I was getting it from several different angles. And of course we shared it as a team and felt, no, it's not 1-to-1. It's 1 to, as it worked out, about 15. Yeah. And these were all guys who are already carrying a lot of responsibility among the churches where they served. And so the transition, which at the time, to be honest, I had nobody within New Frontiers question me, but friends I had from outside New Frontiers said, that will never work. And it's worked wonderfully. It's worked superbly. And now I get people from outside coming saying, now, how did you do that? Because, you know, that's obviously been very successful. And we need to ponder that for our movement.
I think it was 15, as you say,
I think it was
on
15.
that final 2011 leadership conference.
Yeah.
There was the kind of right hand of fellowship to these 15 apostles. Now I think it's 22, 23, something like that. How do you feel that's worked out? And would you feel there are lessons that come out of it, both good and bad, from that process, that if we were to do it again, and maybe others will be doing it in other contexts, you'd say, do this, remember that, don't do that. But in general, it's worked well. Any comments on?
I think it's worked wonderfully well, wonderfully well. And I'm so thrilled that the relationships, I am so blessed that my family, I've got 5 kids, I love watching the way their kids enjoy one another. So we have sometimes family get-together where we've got like 21 grandchildren. I mean, how fond they are of one another is such a riot. We just love coming together. And I'm so thrilled at the comradeship that's out there, the way they've held together. I think at the beginning, they had to find their feet. I thought, what's happening? The church planting slowed down. But that's understandable. They had to form their teams, establish their base, finding their own title. We realized probably that's going to have to happen.
Yes.
Otherwise, it becomes the New Frontiers group with a person's name. And right from the beginning, we thought we can't call New Frontiers Terry Virgo Ministries.
No.
And so having a name and saying, but part of New Frontiers seems to work. And so we've gone for that. And I think it just took a little while for people to kind of find their feet. But now it just gets better and better. Each one's found their feet, getting on with it. And the relationships among the brothers is superb.
What I love seeing, actually, is the way that they are working together. So we had those 2 words, didn't we? That every sphere, as we called it, would be autonomous, so self-contained, but also interdependent.
Yes.
Encouraging a working together. And one seeing that happening across the world in a beautiful way. Really.
Yeah, I think giftedness, you know, people, some very high-profile teachers, prophetic guys, evangelists, people are going between, which is great.
Yeah.
But I think we're still on the same, you know, we're on the same trajectory.
Yeah.
We're celebrating the one New Frontiers identity. And guys have said to me, we go into such and such a nation, and we've said we are whatever their title is. And so I've not heard of that. Oh, it's part of New Frontiers.
Yes.
So they're using that. They're saying, okay, we are New Frontiers, but actually we're this. This is the group we're actually. Because you need to link to a gifted leader. And I think the danger of becoming an organization, it becomes impersonal.
Yes.
And I think personal relationship is fundamental to who we are and how we build. And I know for myself, I've always said, try not to use language like we're joining New Frontiers. Or now with the new groups, we're joining whatever name it is. Because it's an unreal thing. You have to be very careful and try to avoid it.
Yes.
Because it's the short, easy way to say it. And so we all slip into it. But I would try hard to avoid it. So much better to say, I work with Terry Virgo and his team, or I work with whichever brother it is and his team, rather than I'm part of New Frontiers, or I'm part of. And I wish I had said that when you said, you know, all the things you would have done different. I think I would have said that more strongly to the brothers. Be careful. I don't think I gave a lot of hands-on instruction. I think that I didn't do well there. I think there are values that that we all learned together. I guess some of them I passed on. That was what I wanted. The values we hold dear, and I think that's there. They're right in our hearts. We're working the same values. I think sometimes practical detail of how to do it and how not to do it, one maybe could have spent a little bit more time on. And that would have been one that I would have, if I'd thought about it, said much more precisely, try to avoid the language joining. Because people use it, I hear it now, I'm part of. Instead of saying I'm with that guy, or that guy helps us, the language becomes I'm part of whichever title it is.
Which is very kind of organizational or corporate type language, isn't it?
It sounds like an organization. Yes. And I've always felt, I mean, right from the earliest days, I've always felt this, that if you join New Frontiers, and that's the way you think about it, if you've got problems with New Frontiers, then you can speak evil of New Frontiers. From within, you could. You could say, I hate the way New Frontiers, New Frontiers, New Frontiers. Well, you don't have any sense of sinning. If you said, I hate Terry Virgo, well, you've got a problem, or Terry Virgo's got a problem.
Yes.
Terry Virgo's got to repent, so you don't hate him anymore, or you've got to repent, because I've got a Bible, and I've got a God who doesn't allow me to hate, or, to speak evil of. It's unbiblical. So you have to repent. But you don't have to repent when you've got a bad attitude to New Frontiers, because it's not a person. And so that creeps in. And you can be, if you talk organizationally, you're part of, and I know of churches that say, I am part of such and such. But apostolic ministry is not being expressed in that church, actually, or prophetic ministry, which is what we're doing. We're trying to build churches, and that's the difference between renewal and restoration. We're trying to be biblical so that the church feels the impact of apostolic ministry and prophetic ministry. Yes. And I would say at the beginning, when we first started, that's how it was. And I know, obviously, when you're smaller, it's easier. But I was very hands-on. And, we would be like, at the beginning, like, 15 churches or so on. Terry would be in those churches a lot. And loads of people in the ranks would have known Terry.
Known them.
Firsthand. Yes. They knew me. I was with them. I'd laid hands on them probably to be filled with the Spirit and so on. And so it was very relational. And of course, as it gets bigger, by the New Frontiers, Stoneleigh, I'm with New Frontiers, probably never met Terry Virgo in their lives. Yeah. And then you break it down, and now I'm in whichever one. Yeah. And I think it's a guy called so-and-so leads it. And we're in danger because it's no longer personal. And I think we've got to work at that and sometimes I remember John Wimber saying to me, God sometimes gives a man grace to father a movement, a big movement from a platform. There's a grace. Now, John Wimber had it himself.
Big classic, yes.
You felt you knew him, and you kind of felt he knew you, kind of thing. And there was a grace on him to do that. And that is possible. One's seen it. And I think sometimes it's going to have to be like that. But you don't want for too long to think, I think the guy who leads us is cool. I don't know who he is quite. I mean, you've lost what we're talking about. Yes. And I think the more it gets like that, the less it is genuinely apostolic. And I think the danger is that we drift from the values which were hugely important to us.